Welcome to the Salem Chamber podcast. I'm Tom Hoffert, CEO of the Salem Chamber, and we're pleased to have you listening. Let's jump right in. We're here today with president and owner of PacWest Lobby Group, Ryan Tribbett.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
It's super to have you, Ryan. You are very involved in Oregon legislature, politics in general, working with influencers and policymakers to make special things happen. Walk me through a little bit of the passions that you have for being involved in politics.
Well, you've come and met my my staff and my employees before. We're a lobby group, but we call ourselves a solutions company. You helped us sort of identify that what we stand for and represent in the market. And so really what we are is a solutions company that helps communities thrive. Communities are made of people and businesses. Our core competencies representing businesses, trade associations, and helping solve community problems. And there's a plethora, as I think you know as a chamber leader, of problems, the way that businesses engage with government, or should I say how government engages with businesses, and that need fixing, need sorting out, need clarity. There's a lot of ambiguity and a lack of clarity for regulatory structures, and that creates a market for people like me and my company to help solve problems, and that's what we do.
Your company is experts in their craft. You have a very diversified team to tackle a number of issues that is faced both at legislature as well as in different municipalities. Talk to me about the challenges of working in a state that are so partisan. We're largely a partisan state. We have super control of legislature in both the House, Senate, and then the governor. How does that affect how you go to market and represent your clients?
Well, I don't know that it affects the way we engage with government a lot, because the same sort of core principles apply in raising awareness, educating, and engaging with the legislators. So regardless of their party affiliation, those same tools and same mechanisms are effective. I think really what we deal with more of the issue is the fact that in a 6-month session, they will have 3,000 bills. And they will try to limit these things for like the short session in 5 weeks, and everyone gets 2 bills and every committee gets 3 bills. But if you total it all up, it's still 400 bills to be talked about in a 5-week period of time. And all of the bills have to move out of their chamber of origin in the first week, or be posted to move out in the first week. So why are we inundating the process with so much garbage that doesn't need to be there? If we actually limited the number of bills and the things that were being debated down to the issues that were truly critical and needed to be discussed, we could give due time to it, but we don't. And so what we end up having is even on issues where you're able to get the committees of relevance to take up this matter, and you get a big interest from the public, they will limit testimony to 2 minutes at a time, 2 minutes per person, which is just enough time to say who you are, the organization you represent, whether you're opposed or supportive, but you never have an actual discussion. Where did the public process go to where we actually debate and discuss and deliberate and fashion policies that work for the community? That is gone. It's non-existent. And a lot of what I do for my clients is help create a public process and awareness and visibility for issues that the legislature is no longer doing. They've created a market for companies like mine.
Well, it's good to be excelling in this space, and there are a number of firms here in Salem that do an excellent job. Your firm is based on with individuals that you've recruited very strategically due to their skill set. Talk about the variety of clients you represent and some of the key issues you take on as a company.
Okay. So we really do represent a wide swath and cross-section of the community, from healthcare organizations to agriculture interests, to construction, labor unions even. We really run the gambit, gun rights groups, and we recruit people who are interested in those issues, and specifically a broad range from very young people in their 20s, from interns all the way up through, very seasoned politicians, former legislators, people who have run federal agencies, people who have run state agencies for 20 years. We think it's important at our company to have that institutional knowledge to look back and see where we've been and to teach and show and point forward to where we ought to go. And so I think that's an important part of having a dynamic business that can serve clients well now, but also be training a generation of people who are going to be able to serve those clients with longevity into the future.
I think Ryan spoke of one of the pinch points referencing in the session. We have a short amount of time to give testimony, and is the public correct in viewing that many of these issues have already been decided behind the scenes, or is this truly an intellectual process where legislators are wanting to learn from the people who come before them? Because I think there's a little disconnect right now, and why companies like yours are so important is the education on these issues is often done not on the legislative floor anymore, but on one-on-ones, in small group settings, in committee settings, to really bring people up to speed. How do you analyze that process? What do you see? What's the transparency there?
I don't think there's a lot of transparency in the process right now. I think that people kind of learn from like what they see on TV historically, and they think of, these debates, these filibusters on the floor that last, where people are, really getting down on the Senate floor and debating issues and deciding what they're going to do there on the floor. Now with caucus meetings and the way that the caucus leaders organize, and not for no reason, nobody wants to be embarrassed on the floor. They count their noses. They know how to move. I mean, you look at some of the biggest politicians of our day, like Nancy Pelosi, even people who didn't like her, respected her ability to get a bill and advance a bill across her floor. She knew how to counter votes, and she wouldn't put something on the floor that she couldn't get passed. I think a lot of the work actually occurs before the committee even comes in, because like when I mentioned before, the number of bills that these committees are inundated with, if you look at the last Chamber of Origin deadline that we had, you had in some cases 20 bills on every day's agenda. That's an hour and a half committee meeting that you're supposed to have 20 bills. What kind of in-depth conversation you have when you've given only that amount of time for each issue? And some of these issues that they're dealing with are very multidimensional and have a lot of potential unintended consequences. So the work is done well before now, even well before the bills get to committee. And that's why so much of our strategy is around conducting studies, analysis, education, field tours, and things like that with legislators, so that they learn these things before session even starts. This work is done before session even starts in most cases, because when even session convenes, you're limited to only 15-minute meetings with legislators to prepare for your committee hearings. So if you are waiting until the session begins to start this process of advocating for your bill, you are behind the curve. That needs to start 6 months in advance at least.
Well, we're at that 6 months. So I would imagine your life as we prepare for what is a short session coming up at the start of 2024. Your life right now is probably, and I don't want to speak for you, and you can provide clarity, but I would imagine a lot of getting the groundswell around some key thoughts and bills that you'd like to bring through the different representatives and senators. What are some of those key bills you're doing the groundwork on right now in preparation for the short session in 24?
So what is interesting about the process and what's planning for the February session is we haven't even had our first interim committee days to look back at implementation problems for the whole slew of bills that were passed in the last session. And so we haven't even determined what issues there are to sort out yet from the bills that were passed previously, yet we're already having to provide and submit legislative concepts for next session. So I think that February session is an interesting session because it was originally sold, was passed through a ballot measure. It was really sold on this idea that made a lot of sense, I think, to everyone of all parties, which said, at that time we were budgeting by biennium. So it was like, who would create a spending program for 2 years? And as you see the revenues changing like this along the way, not adjust your spending pattern. If revenues start to drop, boy, why would you just continue spending just because it was in your approved budget? I mean, it makes logical sense to anybody. Let's come back and course correct. so it passes. What it ends up coming into, because of the positioning of filing day, candidate filing day is just days after the February session adjourns. It's become the campaign session. It becomes the session. It's not for just small budgetary tweaks and fixing implementation problems. It becomes the political posturing session for we have 3 candidates right now running for, the Democratic primary in Congressional District 5. It becomes the way that candidates position themselves for endorsements and position themselves for the next office they're going to run for, rather than what it was sold to voters on. So I think that there's a certain amount of multiple personalities, I guess, that are taking place in a February session that make it dynamic.
Would you put that in comparison to the session we just got wrapped up in 2023, the long session? What are the big differences between a short session and a long session from your perspective?
Long session's too long, short session's too short. 6 months is more time than the legislature needs to be there, frankly. I think you could probably get done with 4 months. Long sessions are designed for being able to tackle the bigger issues, the bigger, more complicated issues, and the short session's supposed to be for, these slight little tweaks. What we've actually learned in practice, because, we never actually did this structure before we put it in the Constitution. So when we'd actually played out in practical application, it didn't work as the theory, was presented. What we find in short sessions is that even things that you have complete consensus and agreement on, you have things that die because the lawyers can't seem to write the bill properly to reflect the agreements that have been made, some sort of small procedural hiccup, and you've missed the very tight time frame it takes to advance through one of the hurdles in the process, and legislation dies. What you see in a long session is they're actually too long, and their agreements get made, and then people start to realize that something else they cared about died, and then there becomes collateral damage and feelings get hurt, and that's what we saw this last session, certainly. I think that this session was different than what we've ever seen. We see the longest walkout, and people blame the Republicans for the walkout. Sure, I blame everybody, frankly. I blame the Democrats for the conditions that made the Republicans feel like their only alternative was to walk out. I blame the Republicans for walking out. I blame the Democrats for the way they responded to the walkout and focusing on narrowing their focus to what they called mission critical items, which were, just so all you know, it was not my stuff, not your stuff. It was whatever they wanted it to be.
When you look at, as an organization, we work with all parties, as diverse a membership as you can imagine is right here at the Salem Chamber, from the extremists on both sides to centrists in the middle, and those. In light of the information you shared on how the session had some collapsible moments, what do you think the long-term effects, if you were to look into the crystal ball now 3, 4, 5 years down the line, what do you think the key impacts of what happened in this last long session, what impacts will it have on our future now?
I'm telling all my clients that the next few years are going to be the one thing you can expect from them is to expect the unexpected. You have this ballot measure around the attendance and the 10 absences that disqualify people for running for office. There's a lawsuit. We don't know if that's going to hold or that's going to win or not. But if these folks now are unable to run for re-election, and we're talking like 10 of the 13 Republicans in the Senate, I think they have nothing to lose. And if the Democrats don't give them a reason to show up, I don't think they feel that they're necessarily need to show up. When I speak with Republicans in the Senate, they haven't been given a compelling reason to show up. They don't feel like it's their obligation to do that. They don't feel like their voters back home expect that of them. They might be right about that, and they've already been the most extreme punishment's been exacted on them, and there's nothing else. They have nothing to lose. So I'm not convinced we're going to have a February session, to be honest with you.
Interesting. Tell me more.
I think if COVID taught us anything, is that the immense amount of power that the executive branch can wield when they have the proper motivation to do that. And I'm sort of advising my clients and everyone to really focus for the next couple of years on what other levers of government that they can pull on. Legislative leadership. That lever of government is broken right now, in my opinion, and dysfunctional if you want to be charitable. And so there are other levers of government that can be pulled on. Secretary of State has a great audit function and ability that can be quite powerful if they're looking in the right places. And a lot can be accomplished through the executive branch with existing authority under the existing statutes. And so no one's going to come to you, I'm sure, and tell you that government programs are all being run well currently, and a lot of changes and a lot of improvements can be made on the rulemaking side of things, working directly with the COTEC administration and the agencies.
So talking to the voters, let's say I'm a voter at home, I'm listening, I'm probably a little discouraged. Talk to me about the aspirational side. Where do you feel this could go to more represent the needs of residents across our state, of people who are looking for solutions, not for more political divide? Is there a bright horizon that you see?
Boy, I think that really depends on the type of industry sector you're looking at. I mean, if you're talking about the energy sector and you're solar, yeah, there's a lot of positives. There's a lot of opportunity. If you're in the energy sector and you're natural gas, I think your future looks a little bit different, and the work and the way you engage with the legislature is going to feel a lot different, and those opportunities might not feel as much like opportunities. Might be the opportunity to stop something bad from happening. And that's where I spend a lot of my time and focus, working with businesses and trade associations to stop the bad. And with 3,000 bills introduced every session, there's a lot of opportunity to stop bad things.
You hit on a point that sometimes causes me a little bit of reflective pause when I talk, and surely you do, talk to our peers in other states. My peers in other states at emerging metropolitan markets, those mid-sized markets like I would suggest Salem is, and we are a bigger market than most people understand. We're for all intents and purposes in our region, we're 250,000 people. And so then when I talk to my peers, many times they're bringing forward a pro-business platform to legislature. And yet, when I sit on the Oregon State Chamber Board, or we hear from our peers and partners at OBI and many of our business advocates, it is a mitigation business in the state of Oregon rather than a proactive business climate where we can look for ways for tangible business wins. A, do you see that changing? Which by your earlier answers, I may feel I know the answer, but I'd like to hear that. And if you feel it's not in a place ready to change, what would need to happen where business could come with a pro-labor, pro-business platform, meaning more paychecks, more dollars into the economic ecosystem, stronger employment base, recruitment and ability to retain? What needs to happen in this state for those type of pro-business but pro-community sort of things to start being seen by legislature, heard, and really having an impact for our small businesses here?
This is a great question, and one that I can get pretty excited about because I'm working in this space and I'm very passionate about this. So are we there right now? Absolutely not. What needs to happen? First, the business community needs to coalesce around a proactive agenda, which we have not done. We have not done that. We are great at fighting this off and swatting that. We've been playing whack-a-mole in the legislature for a long time. What we need to do is try to get off our heels and take a more aggressive posture forward, if for no other reason, to take some of the air out of the room. If you fill the airspace and time with filling it with the ideas you want to advance, you've at least at minimum diluted the microphone of the people who are pushing bad ideas. And that in and of itself, even if you're not successful advancing it, taking away their microphone from the naysayers, the bad guys, is a good thing and is good for the business community. Now, tangibly, what does that mean from step by step? I think we need to have, and I know people are doing it, business roundtables. We need to come together regionally around the set of issues because there are different, you talk about it all the time, Tom, economic ecosystem, the small business ecosystem in Salem, but there's different. That ecosystem's different in Portland than it is in the Columbia Basin, is different in the Mid-Willamette Valley than it is in Southern Oregon. And I think those groups need to get together and have some real serious conversations about a proactive agenda that they want to put forward. Then, once they have done that, the next step is how you roll that message out. And I think you need to do it big. And I think you need to make a spectacle out of it. And you need to give the legislators the opportunity to take credit for some portion of it, because that kind of buy-in, that kind of ability to give them the sort of limelight to take credit for these good ideas that are going to improve the community, that's the mother's milk of politics these days. And that kind of buy-in, that kind of momentum, everything that happens in politics happens off momentum. So we need to create the public process that isn't happening in the legislature. We need to then build momentum for ourselves and then give legislators the opportunity to get in front of our parade that we created and take credit for it.
I love how you're thinking. And that, I call it aspirational thought. It's a mindset. We need to be working towards things we believe deeply in. And sometimes it just feels like we're against a quiet, silent wall that we can never hop over. And yet, if we were to take the drone or the ladder to the top and look over that wall, we'd actually find a lot of peers wanting the same things. But we have to, as you mentioned, coalesce around some principal ideas that would help the business community. One of the things that we testified on early on in the session and ultimately didn't gain the traction we had hoped for, but would be the raising of the minimum on the cat tax from $1 million up to $5 million, something that we felt was reasonable for small businesses, knowing there would need to be some massaging behind the scenes on how we make the budget balance out and the appropriations into the education sector continue to feel valid by those that looked at that tax. But $1 million, Ryan, you're a small business owner. $1 million off your gross profits can be very different if you're a grocer picking up pennies at a time versus somebody selling Learjets, which is not occurring in our state. Talk to me about how you've seen the impact of the cat tax and its threshold affect your clients and small businesses in the state.
I'm going to go a little broader than that for you. I'm going to actually say the time is here to have a conversation about the nexus between who we tax and the service that's being provided, and what makes sense. What kind of activities are we trying to incentivize, and what types of behaviors are we trying to discourage? And is our tax system being used to promote the type of economy and economic future that we want? And I would suggest that the cat tax is simply manifestation of how disjointed that has come, how that nexus has been broken. Now the conversation is done so much by sort of bean counters that just are looking for, we need X revenue to do a continuing service level of whatever we're at, and less about, does this make sense for who we're taxing, for who's providing the service? And I think the payroll tax that was promoted in Salem is actually the worst example, or I guess the best example of a process not working the right way. It's taxing a group of people, or presented to tax a group of workers that in some cases didn't live here, are already paying for these services in Kaiser or in Turner or where they live. They're already paying for it once. Now they're going to pay for it twice here. In some cases, retirees were not going to be counted in it, even though some of them were very high income earners and people who were, had tier 1 PERS payouts that were going to not be taxed, even though they would have benefited from the service. I mean, this is a total disconnect between who's paying and who's receiving the service. And I think if you believe, and you've gone to school, like I went to school for political science, you learn that there's supposed to be a nexus between those things for people to have faith in their government, faith in the process. It can't feel random and arbitrary, and it does right now.
Yeah, you bring up, I'll use the word, it's a public trust issue, and it's certainly not unique to this current situation with the Salem City Council, but I see it with legislature as well. We touched on it a little earlier. If you are a modern day, I'm going to put you in a hypothetical situation. If you are a modern day candidate, regardless of political party, and you want to have an impact on a group at the state capitol, let's say you're fortunate enough to get your party's nomination and you walk in as a freshman in either the House or the Senate, what are the best first steps to gain traction within the group and to have an impact? Are freshmen discarded? Are new elected officials discarded and expected to toe partisan lines? Or is there a real opportunity for new blood, for new individuals to come in and have an impact in our state on true policy changes to benefit our communities?
No, I think there is still that opportunity, and you see some of those bright, shining things. I mean, you look at, some of the folks that have ascended into leadership with, Julie Fahey, for instance. She was only in for a couple of terms and ascended all the way into the leader position, and it wasn't because she fit the traits of like a normal type of leader. She's not kind of the partisan waving the pom-poms type person. She was kind of a data-driven policy analyst, and actually it was like through that hard work and that's focus on the granular details of policy that her caucus sort of hoisted her up into that position. I think that she's despite disagreeing on certain policies that she's advanced, I think that kind of character, that kind of work ethic can be rewarded. It can be recognized. I think you see that with some folks like Ben Bowman, who just came in, who's a Portland area legislator, but he's come in as a freshman. He's incredibly powerful in terms of his ability to negotiate with other legislators because of the way that he conducts himself in the process. A lot of people used to run for office, and the idea behind the campaign strategy was you identify the bases on each side, the unmovables, the people you're always going to have, and the people you're never going to get, and you focused all of your attention on the middle. And what do I need to do to present myself and get those swing voters to shift so I'm going to win elections that way? Anymore, the strategy has been primarily identify your base, whip them into a frenzy, turn them out. Ignore the moderates in the middle. Let's just hope they don't even remember there's an election happening and they stay home. Let's just whip them, identify the base, whip them into a frenzy and turn them out. That is totally different. And when you run for office with those kinds of promises and that kind of commitment, you get a different practical application in real life in the legislature. And so when I run my campaigns, I still subscribe to that old philosophy. It's good to be in the middle. You want those swing voters. You identify your base, sure. They're going to be with you, but you focus your attention on the swing voters, and that will make the way that you conduct yourself, because the commitments that you make through that process are so much different in the way that you apply those once you've been elected. And so I think that's a kind of a fundamental root part of the problem of what you're seeing now in the legislature.
Talk to me about tactics. You're a gentleman very thoughtful and intentional on the things you get involved with and how you engage people that you want to work with. I want to talk tactical. You have probably one of the most challenging careers in that you have to be very savvy with your knowledge, know when to deploy it and how best to deploy it, but it is still a relationships game. Talk to me about some of the tactical ways you set up relationships with brand new legislators or people within state government that you need to work with. And then number two, how do you tackle the seasoned vet? I've been there, done that. I know my way and where I want to be. Talk to me tactically about how you create those relationships.
That's a good question. It's actually less complicated than you might think. I'll start with the first question about the new legislators. The way I would generally introduce myself is I first of all recognize the fact that they're just regular people like you and me. They want to do good regardless of whether they're a Democrat or a Republican or how you're aligned with either or. They all run for office by and large because they want to do good things in the community and they want to make good decisions, and they have their own narrow area of expertise, but they're going to have to make decisions on 3,000 different bills potentially over a broad range of issues that they are not subject matter experts on. And so when I approach them and tell them generally my story, my how did I get into politics, what matters to me, my family, the things that who I am as a person. Because going through the individual issues and making sure I've done my appropriate background research and I've worked with the agency to make sure the bill's technically proficient, that I have a minimal fiscal impact, and then I've inoculated some of the opposition. Those are the things that what I call getting your head above water. Like, you're not embarrassing for them to align with you, but you still have to give them a reason to want to. And if you're stopping something bad from happening, why should they have to want to not let people, not have bad things happen to you? So why do they make those decisions? They do it because they care about you, Tom, or you, Lena, right? They do it because they care about you as an individual. And so you have to find things in their story that you have commonality with and that they can relate to. And you want to build that bond on a real personal level. You still have to check all of the professional boxes that I mentioned before of having, all of your bill technically proficient, minimal fiscal, no opposition, but you still have to give them the reason why. And that reason why is usually some sort of personal bond. So I think the personal relationship aspect of it's really important. They call it a relationship business, and it is. Most people, when they retire, they say it's because they no longer want to spend and dedicate the time it takes to build those relationships, because it does take time.
I've heard that from a number of your peers, by the way, how challenging the mental mindset is sometimes to know you're always going to be carving relationships. There is no ability to be off stage. You're working every single day with your constituents. And when you get tired, it may be time to bow out of that challenging process.
When you have 66% of the legislature change over 2 election cycles, we saw a lot of retirements.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you the second part. Talk to me about the seasoned veterans. How do you work with those that may either have more experience than you, have deeper knowledge, but more importantly, they've been ingrained. They've been in this state capitol environment. That it's not new. There are no, bright mornings where they're discovering something new. They've been there, done that. How do you work with those individuals?
That one is less than it's more of a specific case-by-case basis, because I think that people tend to mature through the legislative process, and they don't all mature in the same way. And so for some people, but they do have a lot of comments on the record that, if you're paying attention, can inform how to crack that nut. And some people are more analytical, are more data-driven, or more academic, would be driven by an academic study or something that you could do. So in some cases, if I have a certain chair who's inclined that way, who's an old dog, I might say, this might be worth to the client reaching out to Eco Northwest and having them conduct an economic analysis, or something that we can put real scientific data in front of this person to try to inform their conventional wisdom. In other cases, it might just be as simple as find someone who they're close with and get them on contract to help steer their way. In other cases, you might just have to pull rank on them and talk to leadership.
Okay. I want to switch gears to Ryan the man. I have our company, our chamber here has seen you dive head in to a number of things, and it's not just inspiring, because it is inspiring, but it's refreshing to see how boldly, when you believe in something, you personally, that you're willing to commit your time and resources. I want to talk about a couple of them. You are in the halfway point of your Leadership Salem process. Talk to me about what Leadership Salem's meant to you, and maybe some of the peers that you've circled around you within that group.
Well, I know you know this, but Leadership Salem literally changed my life. I recommend it to everyone. I'm having all of my employees kind of one by one go through it each year. So Phil Scheuer's on my team is signed up for the next cohort, and it really, for me as a new business owner, Leadership Salem introduced me to all the nonprofits in the area, introduced me to a whole bunch of other business owners and people in my peer group that otherwise I had no entree to and no sort of relationships there. And so what it's really done for me is, especially through that process, getting to know and like learning my sense of identity as a business owner. What did I represent in the marketplace? Through those relationships, really just kind of figuring out who I am in my skin and how to be confident about that, and how to present that vision as like a coherent idea. And in my process, as I'm a little bit different, it's hard to define a little bit more because I want to build a business around the natural skill sets and talents of my employees, and where do they want to see things grow. Someone interested in grant writing, well, let's send you to school and get your your certification. Now, what is a lobby group doing out there with grant writers on staff? Well, that's why I say we're a solutions company. We also have gotten into, and when I talk about these ideas around these economic, these types of business roundtables. I mean, we've been hosting these economic summits. So we hosted an Eastern Oregon Economic Summit just a couple weeks ago and had 250 people turn out in La Grande, Oregon, of all places. And most of them were driving all the way over from the valley. We had 13 legislators, 7 agency heads, and 2 congressional members. So it was powerful when the business community got together to do this. And when I see that level of interest and that level of excitement and these types of events that they all haven't come back since COVID ended. COVID might have ended and the shutdowns are over, but some of those things that we used to do every year, these types of events, have not come back. So seeing the excitement to bring those things. We're already in negotiations for a coastal economic summit. We're already in negotiations this last week for a Southern Oregon economic summit. So the interest is truly inspiring and exciting. It's electric in our company to see our work going, being embraced in this way.
Well, you're very passionate about your work. You took a incredible step this year, and maybe you don't fashion it as an incredible step, but I can't think of a more impactful, poignant moment when, as the sponsor of Leadership Salem, and that is Willamette University MBA, has their newest recruit. One of the busiest men I know, Ryan Tribbett, is not just a small business owner, a chief strategist on a number of political campaigns and issues. He's leading a crew of people. He has a home life, a family, a dog. And yet you're diving into an MBA program with everything you have going on. Tell me about that move. Tell me about the mindset and the excitement you have heading in as a Willamette MBA.
The mindset. I might have lost my mind. So on the first day, right, of Leadership Salem, the dean came and spoke. And I actually was so excited to hear him speak. And then I think it goes back to when I was in school 20 years ago, finishing my undergrad. I always looked at the MBA program. The MBA JD program was actually the one I was looking at that time, and I kind of aspired to that. I actually was a double major and was minoring in calculus-based statistics and was trying to sort of set my resume up to be like a very qualified applicant. Ultimately, I got a job right out of school and won my first campaign and just started moving that direction. So I didn't go that path, but it was always something that I wanted. So I went out and talked to him, ran out in the hallway, and spoke with him. And really where that started to go was they talked about wanting to create like a scholarship program for my staff. And I thought that was incredible that they would have such a focus. I thought that might be for the T-Mobiles of the world or the Nikes of the world, that a university would want to create a scholarship program for their employees. And I was kind of like, you don't really mean, like, come on, for an 8-employee company, you're going to create a scholarship program for my staff. And so I sort of challenged them on that. Let's sit down and talk then at lunch. And so we went to lunch the following week. And over the course of just about a month and a half, I think, of sort of emailing back and forth, they sort of presented me with a memorandum of understanding. And it was a significant, it was a good 25% scholarship. And for the MBA program, that's fairly significant. So, wanting to really focus and show my staff that I was committed to their personal development and professional development, I wanted to match that. I was so like taken by their gesture that I made that gesture then to my staff and had Willamette come in and announce this partnership, and I unveiled the new company policy to match it, and then yeah, so that was how it all sort of basically started. And then as we were going, Nate Nagy from the university, continued following up with me and started talking to me about the why. Like, why did you want to go previously? Is that waned? Is that still there at all? And so I started looking at my why, and my why kind of started to come together and come into focus. And I think fundamentally, an MBA will make me better at my job of running the business. It will fulfill a long-term goal that I've had, that I still was kind of there in the back of my mind, that I maybe was trying to not acknowledge. And then really focusing on professional development for my staff, I thought it would be really important to show them with my actions that I was endeavoring something aggressively, something that was an ambitious goal for my own professional development, because I really want to walk the walk for my staff, and I want them to be lifelong learners. We run by this sort of mentorship model where everyone has something to learn and everyone has something to teach, and no matter how old or young they are at our staff. And so, I already in my first week, I've been talking to them about the lessons I have learned in my first class, right? And passing those on to my staff. And so I couldn't be more pleased with the decision, but I do think I'm going to be very tired for a couple of years.
We're going to lift you up every time we see you and pat you on the back. We think it's fantastic. And I've seen you interact with your staff, and there's a level of sincerity and trust that is very present, and you should be applauded for that. I'm going to take us on the home stretch and talk about community. You serve on a number of boards, be it with Salem City Club or a little closer to home. You serve on our McLaren Leadership Foundation board. When you're talking to business leaders about allocating time, because there's really two checks we can cut in life. We can give of our time or our resources. When you talk about the time piece and bettering your community, how do you prioritize your time? And what advice would you give to leaders who are listening going, man, Tribbett, I love what you're doing, but where would I get the time to do all this?
I didn't know that I could be as busy as I am now. If you would have asked me a few years ago, I would have never thought that I could have been involved in as many organizations as I am now. But I do have a sort of ethos to it, or a structure to it, or certain things that I feel like kind of interplay. And so I'm very supportive of, I've always been focused on jobs and economic development, workforce pipelines and things like that. I feel like I want to be a part of things that create stability and create career ladders and create investment opportunities. And I think there's a nexus between businesses, where they make their investments, where they stay, and based on workforce. And I think that you need to have young people feeling like they can be successful, because fundamentally for a community to thrive, you need to have growing base of young people and not leaving the community. And I think that's what a lot of rural areas are struggling with right now. I don't want to see Salem or anyone, where I'm at, struggling with that issue. So really focused on that type of, I don't know, that kind of civic engagement, that kind of making people feel like there's this fabric of the community that we all have an opportunity to participate in, and that we can all be successful. So I don't know. Probably need a better answer than that. I'm sorry.
No, I like it. Ryan Tribbett, community leader, vested local owner, and someone who cares a lot about where the trajectory of this state. This has been a conversation with Ryan Tribbett, president and owner of PacWest Lobby Group. Ryan, where can somebody find you? What website are we heading to? What social media channels are we watching?
We are PacWest Lobby Group. That's what we operate under. We have pwlobby.com.
Excellent. And where would they follow your exciting life on social media?
That is also the PacWest Lobby Group. So
great work. Ryan, wonderful to share conversation and perspective with you today. Thank you so much for your efforts, not just on behalf of this organization, but looking at the whole state of Oregon and what is going to be better for thriving communities. It's great to have you in this community and wonderful work.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Salem Chamber podcast. The Salem Chamber is a 501c6 not-for-profit organization representing nearly 1,100 businesses in the greater Salem area. For additional information, please visit salemchamber.org. This has been a production of Dan Johnson and Lena Prine on the Salem Chamber's professional staff team.